What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas here for a special edition of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Of course, everything came to a screeching halt last night. I'm going to give you my take on last night's game. Of course, the Bills' 2023-2024 season came to an end at the hands, once again, of the Kansas City Chiefs. And diving into this game, very disappointing for this season to come to an end the way that it did, in the form and fashion that it has. I gave my immediate reaction to it. Last night I thought that there was a lot left out on the field, a lot of opportunity to where the Bills could have won against the Chiefs last night if a few more plays were made, few passes caught, a few passes completed of sorts, of course, could have led to a much different outcome. But I want to move forward, and rather than dwell on that game, I have a plan for the Bills to get back to where they need to be, and then some. I think this game told me quite a lot about where the Bills need to be, where they should be, where they could be, had they made some of the different moves that I'm going to allude to that they'll need to make now heading into this offseason. So with all that being said, this is my Buffalo Bills 2024 Buffalo Bills offseason plan podcast. I have a plan. It's a very valid one. I think as we go through this, a lot of Bills Mafia members will agree with me. And I want to start off by this period that we're about to go through as a team, waiting for this season to fully complete with a champion that unfortunately will not be the Buffalo Bills. And you have to start off that process by taking a look at your own roster, figuring out who to bring back. And before I dive into this podcast fully, I would like to notate you guys can find the Thomas Take Sports Podcast available on any and all podcasting platforms, audio-wise, as well available on the Buffalo Fanbase Podcast Network. So I greatly appreciate everybody that is tuning in. Please feel free to fire away your comments in the comment section below on any of the points I make, whether you agree or disagree. I greatly appreciate the correspondence, the transfers. Of course, I'll be sure to click your comments as you guys make those comments. So I think that there's plenty of players to bring back to this team. And I want to start off with that topic, the players to bring back to Buffalo. Now, to me, I always like to look at this, as I did last year, with four names that I feel are worthy to be brought back. Now, there is a caveat to this. One of the names is Micah Hyde, that is eligible to be a free agent. I'm curious to see whether Micah Hyde will continue to play, whether that was the last game that he'll ever play in the NFL or not. Only time will tell, but I feel like it leans towards that with the neck injury that he had. And I feel more strongly that that was the last game we'll see Micah Hyde in. So I didn't include him in this list of four names. If he does continue to play, obviously that is a name that I would want to see the Bills bring back, but not including Micah Hyde. These are the four other names that I want to see brought back to the Buffalo Bills. So you have linebacker Tyrell Dodson, cornerback Dane Jackson, defensive end A.J. Epinesa, and safety Taylor Rapp. Those are the four names that jumped out to me in terms of players to re-sign. Dodson, I felt like, played really well in backup duty with the limited options that the Bills had at that linebacker position. Dane Jackson, same thing, stepped up very nicely for the Bills when given the opportunity. A.J. Epinesa is coming off the best year of his career, and Taylor Rapp coming off of a year where he was of big importance to this defense, filling in for Jordan Poyer as well as Micah Hyde, being that dime corner in certain instances alongside Teron Johnson. So those are the names that I'd like to see brought back. But it's safe to say that this topic of players to re-sign is pretty extensive because the Buffalo Bills have five defensive tackles that they're kicking the tires as to whether they should bring back. Of course, that starts off with DaQuan Jones, a player that's of huge importance. That's starting off with defensive tackle Tim Settle, defensive tackle Jordan Phillips, defensive tackle Puna Ford, and defensive tackle Linval Joseph. Some of those guys might already answer these questions. Linval Joseph could retire. DaQuan Jones could retire. Tim Settle, I thought, settled in, pun intended, very nicely for the Buffalo Bills during his time here. So, especially this past season, Jordan Phillips, a big part of what they do in terms of run stuffing, definitely of great importance. And I thought Puna Ford would have more of an impact on this team than what he had. But 5 defensive tackles up for free agency. So can't re-sign all of them. So what I'm alluding to here is that defensive tackle could be a big position, a big point of emphasis to add to in the 2024 NFL draft, as well, potentially free agency. If we're unable to re-sign some of these guys, that could be a point of emphasis, as well as a blatantly obvious one that I'm going to bring up during the show. But as well, running back, the running back depth chart, we know James Cook is the RB1. But the guys behind him could change as well. Ty Johnson up for a contract extension. He's got only 1 year this year, and then he's obviously a free agent heading into this offseason. Latavius Murray, as well as Damian Harris. All 3 of those running backs were on 1-year deals. Could the Bills add to that position via the draft as well, or free agency? Definitely something that I think they'll dabble in both of those avenues to add more depth to that position, new depth to that position, as Latavius Murray did some good things early in the season. As the season wore on, is that a position that you want to spend $4 million on a backup running back? I don't think so, not in today's NFL. So that could be of difference. And then going into what I think is the best opportunity for the Buffalo Bills to get better this offseason and to make a bigger jump where any team can make a big difference to their franchise is via the NFL draft. The NFL draft is extremely important. The draft doesn't make contenders, it builds champions. If these teams draft correctly, any team that has is really able to find themselves in success for a long period of time due to great drafting. So in 2024, I think the Bills have one draft plan, or should have one draft plan in mind. And to me, that is drafting firepower. Firepower is a must. And I mean firepower, meaning offensive firepower for Josh Allen to get the ball to. I think the biggest fact of this season that jumps out to me the most is the hot start of the first half of the season to Stephon Diggs, and then the cold second half that Stephon Diggs had was glaring. To me, it's not a negative towards Diggs. It's more of a, we got Diggs and really nobody else. Khalil Shakir, I think, can be an elite third wideout, an elite slot guy, but I think you need a much better wide receiver too than that of Gabe Davis, and you could get another wide receiver as well to spell Khalil Shakir as a better fourth string option than Deontay Hardy and Trent Sherfield. With all due respect to those two guys, I just don't think they're good enough to elevate this offense. Clearly, they barely had much of a role inside the offense throughout the majority of the year. So, to me, I think drafting offensive firepower is a must. And if I'm going into this draft as the general manager of the Buffalo Bills, which I'm not, but if I was, I would say that one or maybe two wideouts must be picked. And ideally, I would take 2 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds of this 2024 NFL draft, because this draft has plenty of offensive firepower talent to add to a team like the Buffalo Bills that desperately needs it, that has a franchise quarterback in Josh Allen that can get these guys the ball. And some names that I got written down here that I want to mention. I don't know if the Bills will be in the draft vicinity of a Malik Neighbors. I think that would take a massive trade up for the Buffalo Bills to go out and get a Malik Neighbors. But Rome Odunze, Brian Thomas Jr., and I'm not just writing the name down because his name is eerily similar to mine, as well as Keon Coleman Jr. Those 3 receivers, I think, could be a great addition to this team in the early stages of this draft. 2 of those 3, I'd ideally like to get at least one of those 3. If they got 2 of those 3, I'd be doing backflips. Those are the 3 names that really jump out to me. And it would take less off of Diggs in terms of pressure, in terms of ability to drag the offense along, trudge it along. A lot's been put on Stephon Diggs as being the main weapon of this offense, and I think as he's gotten older, he's shown signs of wearing down late in seasons because they rely on Stephon Diggs so much, whereas you have to have a better number two behind Diggs. You have to have somebody that could potentially become a wide receiver one inside the National Football League so that when Diggs' days are up in Buffalo, that option is already here rather than waiting too long, which, I was saying this last year. It was a big point of emphasis for me last season for the Bills to go out and draft a wide receiver. They were not in the range to do so, and luckily they decided, we're not in the range. Those 4 wide receivers went in a row, and the Bills took Dalton Kincaid, which I think was a great pick. Dalton Kincaid had the best rookie receiving season in Bills history this year, so went very, very well, to say the least, for Dalton Kincaid, and that just adds to Dalton Kincaid, whether they bring in a Keon Coleman, a Brian Thomas Jr., or a Roma Dunze. All 3 of those options I really, really like. Those are the big names that really jump out to me. As well, there are some other guys that are worthy of being talked about in this conversation. Ladd McConkey is a very interesting prospect out of Georgia. Troy Franklin out of Oregon. Of course, Adonai Mitchell out of Texas, and Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. Those are some other names at the wide receiver position that I really like potentially for the Buffalo Bills. And the great thing about this need is that it can and should be addressed in this draft. It's one that I think is worthy of being looked at, and one that I think is doable to address and to bring forth a better group of players. So as well, I mentioned defensive tackle. I mentioned the fact that they need wide receivers, right, just now. QB2, that's a possibility as well in the draft or free agency due to the fact that Kyle Allen is a scheduled free agent. I don't know how everybody feels about Kyle Allen. We didn't really get to see him play, thank God. It's not a massive need for the Bills. If they did bring back Kyle Allen, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But I go back to training camp. I go back to preseason. I didn't really like what I saw out of Kyle Allen and backup action in those opportunities that he had to throw the football. I thought that the Bills could have done a little bit better. They had to go the cheap route at the backup quarterback position, and I felt like that was just a cheap solution. And God forbid, if Josh Allen were to ever go down, they would need a much better option there than Kyle Allen, in my opinion. And it's very possible that, dare I say, potentially even inevitable, that with the way Josh Allen plays, that he could get hurt. So the Bills need a backup quarterback, one that will be of, great service to them. And I hope that is what we see, getting a better backup option. Now, I don't know if that backup option is via the draft. I don't know if that backup option is free agency, but I think that's something that has to be addressed. That's what I will say. So getting some comments here on my Facebook post. I said, hey, Bills Mafia, give me some thoughts on what you want to see from the Buffalo Bills in 2024 before I go live. Of course, Kevin Chambers said new coach, new wide receiver, possibly new punter, and a field goal kicker competition. I'll tell you guys this, and it goes without saying, we'll get that QB2 question mark off of there. One thing that I know with the utmost certainty is that the Buffalo Bills are not, I repeat, not firing Sean McDermott. It is not going to happen. If there was ever a case for the Buffalo Bills not to fire Sean McDermott in the last 3 years, this year is that case. The case is improved for himself, not declined. It's actually improved based on how this season went for the Buffalo Bills. And I'll tell it to you guys like this. 2 years ago, the 13 seconds, that was a case to get fans riled up and ticked off, right? That was the case to do that. But this year is not. This was probably one of the most impressive coaching jobs that McDermott has done, battling back. And I was yelling at him. I was saying his name loud in terms of my frustrations with Sean McDermott. Make no mistake about it, I was very frustrated with McDermott. When the Bills were 6-6, back against the wall, they battled back. They got to 11-6. They won a playoff game. They just came up short again against the Chiefs. What do they have to do to get better? I don't think blowing the whole thing open, tearing the house down would make the Bills better. And firing Sean McDermott would be the first sign of blowing the roof off the place at one Bills drive and starting over. That's not the solution. That could only open up a whole new can of worms that, frankly, the Buffalo Bills don't need, that could make the Bills actually worse. So I say to that thought, be very, very careful of what you wish for. Be very careful. So that's something that I just want to throw out there. Be careful what you wish for. Don't wish for the Bills to fire McDermott just yet. Not many great coaching options out there. And I will talk about the coaching staff in this podcast today. And of course, McDermott falls in line with that. Me saying that he's not going to lose his job as the head coach, you'll see what I mean by that in the near future. So Buffalo's biggest question marks. There are two players on this roster right now that contributed very little. One due to suffering yet another devastating injury. The other worked his way back from a devastating injury, and it hampered his playing ability, providing a lack thereof throughout the majority of this season. And that is none other than, of course, Von Miller and Tre'Davious White. Now, to me, they're the two biggest question marks on this roster because Von Miller was out there. He was deemed healthy enough to play, but he doesn't have the goods. The mind is there. The mind knows what to do out on the field. The body is just not willing. And to me, the biggest moment of this season for Von Miller was when the Bills decided to make him inactive for the I guess you could say Christmas Eve finale is what I'd like to call it. The week prior to the season actually ending, regular season wise, the Bills decided to bench Von Miller and make him a healthy scratch. That to me told me that the Bills kind of got things a little bit wrong, unfortunately, with bringing Von back out there all those weeks prior. He was not fully ready to be out there. He was put out there on a snap count on a limited basis and really contributed nothing to the team throughout the majority of the season. They said things like, oh, he's working his way back. He's getting better. He's inching closer and closer, getting better to being what he once was. But I don't see it. I watched the tape. I didn't see Von Miller virtually get much better at all as the season wore on. At any point, I felt like he was actually getting worse in certain. So to me, as we look at this, wide receiver 2 is a massive need. And in order to add to that via the draft, in order to add to the team, Von Miller's contract is something that has to be revisited, whether it's a restructuring, whether they force him into retirement. Those are two different topics for a different day, but those are the only two topics that could greatly help this team. If Von Miller comes to the Bills next year to play another year, it's got to be at a much lesser cap number than what he's getting paid heading into 2024. And Trey White is even more concerning than that of Von Miller because he did suffer a horrible injury, early in the season. And we really haven't heard a peep out of what's gone on with Trey White since. And I know that his last injury made him second guess his ability quite greatly due to coming back from that. Not the easiest thing to do, right? To come back from something like that. So will it be easier for him to come back from something like this? That's a big, big question mark. As well, the coaching staff questions. So this season, you'd be looking at it in halves from 6-6 to 11-6. What allowed the Bills to turn this thing around, going from 5-5 actually to 11-6? Firing Ken Dorsey and promoting Joe Brady from within was a big reason as to why the Bills were able to come back at the level that they did. Joe Brady did a fantastic job, got the running game going, featured James Cook in the offense, got James Cook cooking, as the kids say these days, and Josh Allen really seemed a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident in running that style of offense. There was 11 personnel or not. Allen just looked better. And, I liked Ken Dorsey a lot. There were a lot of things to like about him. It was right at the time to give him that opportunity. He was the next man up, next man willing to obviously take the job, to keep things kind of copacetic and similar to what they were before. But I think he overthought the position, just was not prepared, was not ready for that opportunity with this team. And Joe Brady was. He took the opportunity and he ran with it. So that's obviously a big question. Does Joe Brady stay or go? Because anytime a coach is as impressive as Joe Brady was, typically they go on an interview cycle with this team to interview for their head coaching position, possibly this collegiate program to go interview with that program, become a head coach in the collegiate ranks. Something that I could see, because Joe Brady has had success at both the NFL level and the collegiate level, running offenses for LSU and for the Buffalo Bills. I think he's done a really good job. I'd love to see him stay on board. There's moments where I could definitely see why fans are frustrated with the second half of the offense last night, but I think it was more of an execution aspect to this offense that led them to this defeat rather than a play calling aspect as well. So in this situation as well, coaching staff questions: does Sean McDermott conduct his second season in a row as the Bills defensive coordinator? Now, to me, I think this is the biggest feather in the cap of Sean McDermott. Not only did he help the Bills battle back from 5-5, 6-6 to 11-6, but to me, the greatest achievement that McDermott was able to accomplish as a coach this season was the productivity of this defense, despite the devastating injuries that this defense suffered throughout the entirety of the year. Not only Trey White, not only Daquan Jones for the majority of the season out, but Matt Milano out for the majority of the season as well. Battling back from an injury, Von Miller. A lot of hodgepodge new pieces on this defense as this defense is repaired and brought back to being a dominant front. I think that will be a big part of this offseason, and I hope that it features keeping some of the players that I just mentioned, Taylor Rapp, as well as A.J. Epinesa, as well as Dane Jackson and Tyrell Dodson. I felt like they were big pieces to this defense this year. I'd love to see them come back. I'd love to see them, get another crack at it with Sean McDermott leading the way. I thought he did phenomenal with those five players, helping them get to the height that they did during this season. So if Sean McDermott would have stayed as the defensive coordinator, I would not be against it. A lot of guys that I talk to about the Bills and respect greatly, they disagree with me on that. They think that it's too much for Sean McDermott, too much on the head coach's plate. They need a defensive coordinator, not named Sean McDermott. They need an offensive coordinator in Joe Brady. If he stays, great. Obviously, Sean's not going to be running the offense. You get the point. Too much on the plate of Sean McDermott. I disagree. I think Sean McDermott really embraced the challenge, and I think he did really well with it, despite the limited ability that he had on the defense as the season wore on. Each week, the defense was more limited and more limited by injury than what they had hoped. Going down to your fifth, sixth linebacker, your third, your fourth best corner, it says a lot about where this team was as the season wore on. They were destroyed, decimated by the injury bug, and I'm not making excuses. They still had an opportunity to win that game last night despite the injuries that they had suffered throughout the entirety of the year. They just came up short. But I would really like to see Sean McDermott back for another season as the D coordinator of the Buffalo Bills. That's just my take on it. I feel like that was the best way to move forward with this defense. The defensive captains, guys that will be captains, guys like Greg Rousseau, guys like Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, who have been captains, praised Sean McDermott for the defense that he called this year. They had more fun playing defensive football for the Buffalo Bills than they ever had before. And I think a lot of that, Sean McDermott trying to change his ways a little bit, trying to be a little bit more aggressive. And we saw that, even as puzzling as it was, to the level that we did last night. Sean McDermott trying to be more aggressive. But realistically, guys, I want to say that this is a team that is going to continue to be good. This is not a team that's going to fall off and become irrelevant. They're always going to be relevant as long as Josh Allen stays healthy. Number 17 back there, There's nothing that this team can't accomplish in their pursuit of getting back to the playoffs without Josh Allen. The cards were stacked heavily against them, lots of injuries, and they were able to overcome it, get to the playoffs, win the division. Yes, they did come up short again, but hey, they were able to make it, which was huge. 4% chance of winning the AFC East and making it to the playoffs with a 6-6 record. They did both of those things. So they beat that 4% chance and made it as far as they could. Really, I think this was as far as this team could go. If they make the changes that I think that they should make, adding wide receivers to this team will only help. Adding new pieces defensively, I think they could get a little younger at defensive tackle. I think as well a corner could be in order to add to the secondary, potentially a safety as well. The offensive line, I thought this was one of the best offensive lines that the Bills have had in a long time, but Mitch Morse is getting a little bit up there in age. Could they bring in a new center to kind of be that guy coming up, in the following years? Could Mitch Morse be done? Could that be the last year that we see Mitch Morse lined up in Buffalo Bills red, white, and blue? It might be, but I really believe that this team is not that far off. It's just executing. It's real. Honestly, there's no doubt in my mind that they should have won that game last night. It just came down to making a few more plays. Sounds cliche, but the plays were there to be made, and they weren't made. And that's why they're packing their bags, packing their lockers, cleaning out the locker room, and they'll be, playing some golf in the spring and summertime. It is what it is. I feel very confident, though, that with this plan that I have, that I could help the Bills get to where they needed to go. If I was the GM of the team, that's what I'd try to do this year, for what it's worth. I know I'm not, but we're all playing GM here moving forward from this really tough loss. And I get it. There's plenty of reasons to feel like I need to blow this up. We need to blow this up. I get it. I really do. But at the same time, I think that that's just a rash decision. I don't think that that is the form and fashion in which I would go about it. Okay, so that's just my take on it. And really that comes down to getting us to that point where what do they need to do to be better? What do they need to do to get to that next level? So going to some of the comments here, I'd like to just address these here. Matt Ariza, that's another one. Ken Zintel said Matt Ariza would be a player that he would want back. Kevin says new coach. Kevin Chambers is hammering that new coach point. McDermott ain't it. He's got 3 years left on his contract, guys, and I get it to an extent. But it's not going to happen. I just know it's not going to happen, so there's no point in even really discussing that. He's got 3 years left on his deal. Pagulas will not fire him. It's just not going to happen. So it's not worth diving into as much as, most would probably like me to, but there, I just did. He's not going anywhere. They're not firing him. So as well, looking at the comments on the YouTube page that I have, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, talking about Khalil Shakir, I agree that Khalil Shakir could be an elite wide receiver 3. I was really impressed with what he brought to the table, and even as a wide receiver 2, but mainly that work being done by Shakir is being done in the slot, and rightfully so. I really like what he brought to the table in the slot. I think he could be one of the best slot receivers that the Bills have ever had, if in fact they do this plan. Get a great wide receiver 2 in there that could potentially be a 1. Then you have that guy, Shakir, and potentially another that you draft in this year's draft to be the future 3 wide receivers when Stephon Diggs is out the door, which I think will be a lot sooner than what most people think. Won't be heading into 24 and 25, but could be heading into 25 and 26. This team might move on from Stephon Diggs with the out that they have in his contract beyond 2025. He'll be 32, 33 years of age at that point. And as these 2 seasons, as I mentioned from the top, Stephon Diggs has kind of worn down over the last second half of the last 2 years. And I think a lot of that has to do with just the wear and tear of being heavily relied upon high output that he's had these last 4 or 5 years, higher than just about anybody statistically. So eventually that's going to catch up to you. And I think that they're at a point where they need to add more to this offense. Dalton Kincaid was a nice start, but Gabe Davis is probably gone. And to be honest with you, I don't blame the Bills for moving on from Gabe Davis. He was way too inconsistent this year, way too much money. As an impending free agent, could go for $10 to $14 million a year. He's not worth that much money. It's just being honest. He's a great run blocking wideout. He's got big games. He's got games where he disappears. Too inconsistent for that amount of money. So there you have it, guys. That is the plan. This will be the last podcast that I do for quite some time. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to remove myself a little bit from the Bills stuff. Really appreciate all the love and support that I had this season. The podcast did great. That's putting it mildly. Between the interaction that I had with the fans this year, meeting a lot of people from the Buffalo fan base, fan base, I like to say, as it's called, being on that network on Wednesdays, usually that's when I would put out the show, but I got a busy week here coming up, so I wanted to hop on this early. I'll re-air this episode as well, for Wednesday. As you guys are listening to it on Wednesday too, you'll hear me say I'll re-air it for Wednesday, but recorded today, Monday, putting this back out, churn this back out, get the discussion going. A lot to discuss. Might not be the last time you guys see me for a little while. You never know. Maybe I will be back sooner than what I expect. But it was a very tough way to end the year. There's no doubt about it. But I had hoped that this team wouldn't run out of gas. And it felt like they did. It felt like the injuries were really hard to overcome. I don't think that's an excuse. I really think that that's a legitimate reason as to why they had a very tough time stopping the Chiefs last night from accruing big plays, chunk plays left and right throughout the night. So Tyler Bass as well, comparing that to Scott Norwood, I think is comparing that missed kick to Scott Norwood. Granted, they both went wide right? That's why they are comparing the two. But I think it's absolutely ridiculous that the stage was completely different. It just doesn't make much sense. It feels like it's lazy to say, oh, that's a comparison to Scott Norwood. If we're comparing the two, I would then say, well, Scott Norwood came back for another season, helped get the Bills into the Super Bowl again. And then the Bills moved on from him and brought in Steve Christie, their all-time points leader, as the heir apparent to Scott Norwood. So who knows what's going to happen with Tyler Bass? They say they believe in him. He was very shaky this year, was not dominant like he was in previous years. He's a very young kicker, and they just signed him to an extension. So I don't see him going anywhere either, right? So with all that being said, I greatly appreciate the support this season. It was a great year to be a part of another year of podcasting, right? And being able to reach out to new fans and bring new fans, to the show and, get to hear from them and chat with them about the team. And realistically, I really enjoy doing this. It's been a lot of fun. And it's fun to go through this era of where this team was to where they've been. They haven't gotten to the complete goal yet, but safe to say that Bills football has been a lot more fun since they drafted Josh Allen back in 2018. So shout out to Allen. Great season for him. Put the team on his back for the majority, if not the entire season. Once again, we've just got to get this guy some help. Just got to get this guy some help so that he's not having to put this team on his back, play hero ball. We don't need that anymore. Doesn't win us games, right? It can only win us a half. It can only get us so far. When we're playing the elite of the elite, we need a lot more than that. So there you have it, Bills Mafia. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Go Bills.